Hello, listeners. Welcome to another great podcast session. I'm Shivani Muthyala. The most common tech trends that are booming in the market these days are artificial intelligence and deep tech, right? They have been taking over all the industries rapidly, whether it be manufacturing or logistics or healthcare, education, and also the dairy supply chain. It's amazing, right? Let's see how digitalization has accelerated the growth of dairy supply chain and livestock in the words of Ranjith Mukandan, who is the CEO and co founder of Stellapps, which is the India's leading dairy tech startup company. So, why late? Let's welcome our speaker for the day. Hi, Ranjith. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good. Thank you, Shivani, thank you for having me on your podcast.
Pleasure to have you here on Analytics Insight podcast. So, first of all, could you tell our listeners what Stellapps is all about?
Yeah, so Stellapps is about using technology, all that you mentioned, things like AI, deep tech, analytics, cloud, IoT, using a bunch of technology as enablers to help improve the productivity, quality, and traceability of the dairy supply chain. So we focus at this point only on dairy, and it's end to end, pre-harvest and post-harvest, using all of the tech as an enabler to help shift this rather old-fashioned agri industry into the next orbit. So that's essentially what Stellapps is all about.
Wonderful. And what are the company's specializations and services that it is actually offering to its clients?
Yeah, so we offer three things to our customer base. One is the dairy farmers who are the core of this entire dairy supply chain with their cattle and all of that. We provide agri inputs and services to the dairy farmers in a retail fashion. So the agri inputs include things like cat nutrition and soil inputs and financial services, fintech, insurtech, and all of that. So that these dairy farmers who are at the heart of this entire supply chain can get access to a well-organized, professional, consistent agri inputs and services using a data and tech to help ensure that they get the right inputs at the right point in time. They get the right services at the right point in time. So that is one part. The second part is market linkages. If there are FMCG companies out there who want to sell antibiotic-free milk, want to sell milk or value-added products like paneer and other products completely in their brand, but are looking for a backward integrated partner. So we offer the tech stack bundled with our operations so that consumers like you and I can get differentiated paneer, differentiated milk in the market. It could be antibiotic-free milk. It could be milk that's highly traceable down to the last animal. It could be milk that is rich in omega-3 fatty acids so that we're all healthy and nutritious, have nutritious access to nutritious dairy products, so on and so forth. So that's the second part. The third part, all of these is powered by our digital highway using a combination of AI, data, cloud analytics, and all of that. We use that to power this entire supply chain, including the agri inputs and the market linkages. And if there are dairy processors who are wanting to digitize their supply chain, can directly license our technology stack from us, and we could help them deploy it end to end as a system integrator. So this is the three parts to our business. Obviously, all of them work together. They're all interconnected, but just putting things in perspective for you.
That sounded quite interesting. And, we are now excited to know how the company is facilitating digitalization in the dairy supply chain, using new tech innovations. So, could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we, in India, the dairy industry is highly fragmented, right? There are 300 million cattle, 80 to 90 million dairy farming families, producing, 560 million liters of milk on a daily basis. All of this combined together, pre-harvest and post-harvest, comes to about 7.6% of our GDP. Since it's high, these are all smallholder farmers. These are not very rich farmers with large land holding. These are not farmers with 100, 200 animals. These are farmers with 2 to 3 animals. So Indian dairy predominantly follows an aggregation model where the farmers walk into a collection center. At the collection center, you do the first point of aggregation where you aggregate about 100, 200 liters of milk. And then the milk is then carried to a cold chain center, typically called as a BMC center or a chilling center, because milk, as you can imagine, is the most perishable crop out there. So it needs to be chilled quite quickly. So that's the second point of aggregation. And then finally, it moves to a processing plant where it gets packaged and then sold as packaged milk or paneer or all of it. And 1.3 billion people consume it every single day in one form or the other. Now, along the supply chain, we use tech components such as on the farm side, we have an animal wearable that's like a Fitbit for the cows. It helps you monitor all of the animal characteristics. It helps you in preventive healthcare. It helps you in peak estrus detection and breeding optimization. It helps you in general animal upkeep. It helps you in adjusting and monitoring the various vaccination protocols and in all of it. So that's one piece. The second piece is we also use tech like facial recognition of animals, so that using a simple Android phone, you could uniquely identify animals using their various facial and body and muzzle prints, so that you don't have a dependency on an external hardware like an ear tag to identify them. And this mechanisms helps the financial industry and insurance industry underwrite risk better, because it doesn't lend itself to ID manipulation like the traditional identification mechanisms. And then there are other mechanisms like the herd management application, which is used to Uberize village level technicians who intervene at these farms. I mean, this could be people like the paravets, veterinary staff, veterinary doctors, the artificial insemination technicians, farm intervention technicians. Right now, without our platform, herd management platform called MoveOn, they would do very simple brick and mortar interventions. But with our platform, they can do more data-led and tech-led interventions at these farms. And that's at the farm. At the collection center, we have our IoT platform that helps you in grading and pricing the milk, that literally converts milk into currency in real time, so that when farmers walk in with a pail of milk, they walk back with a tingle of currency in their account. So it's literally real time. You could do that, but of course we give various flexibility for the dairy process to pay them after 5 days, 10 days, depending on the working capital cycle. And then there's cold chain. As I mentioned, milk is probably the most perishable crop out there, right? And in India, we burn about 2 billion kilowatt hours of energy in chilling milk, out of which probably 500 million is with diesel. So it's very critical from a carbon footprint optimization point of view that we chill in a very optimal manner, energy optimal manner. And more importantly, we ensure that the cold chain protocols for milk is followed. Because if you're trying to convert this milk into a baby infant formula or a UHT milk or a Kanazwa grade cheese, the cold chain better be really good, right? So we help ensure that the milk is not under chilled, not over chilled. It's perfectly managed from a cold chain perspective. And then we have an end-to-end ERP that uses all these data pools that come out, all the analytics that come out is blended into one common workflows, so the right stakeholders get the right alert at the right time. So these are some of the deep tech interventions that we do across the supply chain, Shivani.
Wonderful. And it seems like Stellapps is a tech-based company, right? So how is it actually leveraging the new tech trends, especially the artificial intelligence and big data analytics?
Yeah. So for us, AI and big data are tools that touch almost everything that we do. Right? It's quite a massive supply chain, highly fragmented. Thanks to our IoT approach, we get huge amount of data. We have data hooks, as I mentioned, at the farm, collection center, chilling center, and the plant. Using these data hooks, we get really, really rich data. And we use the data coming into our cloud and our applications, we blend it into various AI applications. For example, facial recognition of animals. So we use image processing and AI algorithms to uniquely identify animals based on their facial attributes and body attributes. Preventive healthcare for animals. Obviously, A veterinary doctor cannot go to the farm every single day and take care of the animals, right? It's going to be too expensive. So we use the AI algorithms on the cloud as a reasonable substitute for lack of expertise in premise. So preventive healthcare algorithms tell you when an animal is going to fall sick, why is it sick. If you can actually catch sickness at a subclinical level, you can actually ensure that the animals are hale and healthy without too many expensive healthcare interventions. So these are some examples on the farm side. Similarly, we get a lot of data about the farmers' assets, which are cows and the farmers' cash flow. How do you use these data streams to help underwrite credit risk better, so that the farmers get access to organized credit very quickly? So we have algorithms that help assess the farmers' credit scores based on all the alternate data sources that we have access to, like the animal data, livestock data, agri input data, cash flow data, farmer psychometrics, and then use this data to arrive at, okay, this farmer can actually afford a 30,000 rupee loan, and he's most likely going to repay that loan. Right. So other than livestock analytics, we do analytics from a financial standpoint as well, financial assessment standpoint. And then there's cold chain, because again, these are remote villages. You can't have someone overseeing these cold chains 24/7. Right, these are going to be too expensive. So how do you ensure that the software triggers the right alerts, for under chilling, over chilling, inappropriate use of energy, and all of that? So again, all the data that we get, we use AI algorithms to assess, when to alert the right personnel from an under chilling, over chilling, or other protocol non-adherence perspective, or from an energy optimization perspective, or any other cold chain and related protocol issues. So on the cold chain perspective, we use AI algorithms. We use AI algorithms on the farm side from an animal and livestock management perspective, and we use data and AI from a credit score assessment perspective. So these are some of the areas where we predominantly use. But for us, it's day-to-day affair to use AI and big data, because without that, you can't be solving this problem at scale, especially given that it's highly fragmented. It's a very price sensitive market, and we can't deploy operational hands and feet. We just need software, AI, and big data to help us solve this problem at scale.
Happy to know how the company is enhancing these new tech trends, for its operations. So now, how do you think AI-based startups are changing the face of agriculture industry, especially considering the Indian scenario, by simplifying the value chain process and also imparting the transparency? So, what is your take on this?
Yeah, so I think every startup who are playing in this agri space, it could be the fruits and vegetable space, pulses space, it could be the dairy space. I think it's inevitable that they will touch data and AI in some form or the other, simply because there's no other alternative to be able to solve this problem in a compelling way. Because unlike an urban use case where the affordability is higher, where there is more concentration of these various stakeholders in the supply chain, the rural and agri-facing use cases are highly fragmented, highly widespread, and it's very price sensitive too. And the only way in which and you can't apply brute force operational effort alone. You need high optimizations. Whatever little operational intensity you apply needs to be highly optimized. You can't possibly be, for example, running behind every animal, every plant, or every fruit and vegetable, monitoring it manually. But you need continuous assessment if dynamic traceability is to be implemented. Similarly, there are a lot of workflows, and it's highly fragmented, multiple hops in the supply chain. The only way to ensure that there is supply chain integrity is with data and AI. Only way to ensure quality in the supply chain is by espousing appropriate grading and pricing tools. Only way the yield on the farm side can go up is by espousing the right AI and big data analysis, big data tools that exist. So in my opinion, though a lot of startups get started with trade and commerce as a starting point, but to make that trade and commerce run very effectively with efficiencies in the supply chain kicking in by way of yield improvement, by way of ensuring the supply chain integrity is not lost, by way of ensuring that the cold chains are appropriately maintained, it's quite inevitable, though the starting point might be commerce, that they have to sort of espouse a lot of these AI, big data technologies to make sure that they're able to run their businesses very profitably.
Absolutely. And is digitalization of dairy practices, emerging as a major disruptor in the labor-intensive industry or not? What would you say in this particular context?
Yeah, and absolutely. In fact, labor is a really big problem in rural areas, today, because most people, able-bodied personnel, they tend to leave villages for greener pastures in the urban, cities. Right? They're either doing, driving cabs in the urban centers or doing some of the work. So who are left back? It's not like you have easy and cheap access to manpower in these villages, and there are several villages where we go that are only slightly older people. Or so what we try to do is we ensure that a majority of the supply chain can be run in a highly automated manner. So with minimal manpower, you can run the supply chain efficiently. That's number one. And number two, we can't afford to deploy manpower even if we had access to it, only because the costs would go up. So it has to be highly efficient. It has to be highly data, app, and tech driven, so that one person can manage multiple points of presence in the supply chain, so that with fewer hands and feet, you're able to efficiently manage a large supply chain. So the first point I mentioned is a shortfall of competent and able-bodied labor, and hence we need to ensure that there is sufficient tech to ensure that with who is left back, they can run the supply chain. And number two, it becomes inevitable to make sure the efficiencies kick in. And finally, the one that I probably didn't mention is that even at the villages, to sort of ensure that the farmers, are on an entrepreneurial trajectory, wherein they're, would want to progress from a smallholder, farmer to an agripreneur type of an orbit. Even they will need good tech and support so that they feel quite inspired that they can actually run an operation at scale. They can actually move from a farmer orbit to a small MSME orbit, so that they reap the benefits of scale as well. So I think for these three reasons, I think tech, big data, AI, and all the tech needs to come into picture to ensure that the supply chains are efficient, and the labor problems and competence problems and skill problems are mitigated.
Very rightly said, Ranjit. And as we also spoke about technology prior, so deep tech is also one of the leading tech trends, right now in the market. So how are deep tech solutions, helping animal health monitoring and also for ensuring the quality produce?
Yeah, absolutely. So, deep tech is a very, broad term. So we have an hardware design team, an embedded team, cloud data science team, and we touch, it's not simple IT or ICT, which is, simple ERP kind of systems, right? We, design our own hardware, we write our own embedded software. As I mentioned, the animal wearables for a smallholder farmer, which is like a Fitbit for cows, is a completely in-house designed product, starting from the mechanicals, the hardware, embedded, and the whole stack is developed by us. So that's one case in point. The second case, to be able to uniquely identify an animal. So typically in a village, what happens is, if you try to a barcode or QR code an animal with the ear tag, right, it will get misused, because the farmers might keep this tag in the pocket and tag any animal when they're dead and say and claim insurance for it. Whereas with facial recognition, using a simple 5 megapixel and upward resolution phone, you can uniquely identify an animal. So the images come to the cloud and we run AI algorithms to sort of identify it. So again, these are not pre-existing mechanisms. We have to develop things grounds up. And all of the IoT parts that I mentioned, grading and pricing, where you actually literally measuring the milk quality and quantity and converting it into currency, is again done by a lot of deep tech components that touches the embedded space, that touches sensors, sensor controllers, IoT routers, a whole bunch of cloud frameworks that we had to build grounds up, because we started developing some of these frameworks 8 to 10 years ago, when a lot of these frameworks did not pre-exist. But today, some of these frameworks, like the IoT event management frameworks, are available off the shelf on an Amazon platform. But today, we had to develop these grounds up, and we continue to use it. And it gives us a lot of flexibility and commercial upside, because it's completely in-house. So be it on the cloud side, analytics side, IoT event management framework side, sensor managers, sensor controllers, IoT routers, image processing, big data using NoSQL databases. We use all of the deep tech that's available there. Not because we are quite enamored by it, but for us it's a compulsion and it's a need. Otherwise, we can't build out this next generation platform that we're aiming to build out.
Thanks for elaborating on that front, Ranjit. In the same context of technology, so how is artificial intelligence enabling the financial inclusion of farmers, by establishing easy access to the credit, or whether it be banking or even the direct benefit transfers?
Yeah, no, good question. So, as you know, unlike the urban consumers and customers like you and I, who have a credit score because we have a credit card, we can borrow, taken a vehicle loan, home loans. All of us have probably a TransUnion CIBIL score or one of those scores. But majority of the rural segment, right, the farmers who we deal with, these are real remote scenarios. In a good 50 to 60% are new to credit, NTC farmers, and they do not have their own credit scores, right? Of course, 40% do have, 40-50% do have because they've taken some loan from an MFI. So they have an MFI score, they are part of an SHG, or they have some mechanism to demonstrate their credit worthiness. So what we do is we use alternate data sources. We use data sources such as the animal and livestock data. We use data sources such as the farmers psychometric analysis. If a farmer is more adherent to a specific animal husbandry protocol, then we qualify him or her to be a better farmer. And then we also use the flow data based on the farmer's milk pouring. We know how much of money is flowing into his account on an ongoing basis. So a combination of these data streams, we have developed something called as a Moose score, which is like an alternate credit score for the dairy farmers. And the AI algorithms work on this data stream on an ongoing basis to help us, and also combines with a lot of existing third-party data sources out there on the internet, right? It could be weather data, it could be environmental data, it could be satellite imageries of the cropland that the same dairy farmer might have. So we are also in the process of combining some of these non-direct data sources so that we're able to come up with a composite score, and the algorithms can tell us, which farmer, needs what kind of credit at what point in time, and what's the likelihood of he defaulting, either because because of poor intention or his inability to repay. So these are some of the areas like Moose score where we're actually trying to use AI to help underwrite risk better. That's one. Second, on the insurance side, which is very closely related to lending and financial services, because if you give a farmer a cattle loan, that cattle also better be insured. We're trying to use AI algorithms to better, underwrite insurance risk. Using our wearables, facial recognition, all of that, we first make sure that the animal identification is foolproof because it's completely image recognition driven. We also then we ensure that the data stream, the animals, whether the animal is hale and healthy, the animal is live and kicking, those data streams come to us automatically into an algorithm that helps underwrite insurances better, because now we're able to in real time monitor the asset that you're insuring. So both on the insurance and insurtech perspective and fintech perspective, we're using data and various of these data streams to help underwrite the credit risk and insurance risk better.
Perfect. I think these particular things are really going to add a lot of value to the farmers, in real time. And as we also spoke about, facial recognition in our before questions and answers. So, it is quite demanding tech right now. So, how can cattle, facial recognition boost livestock coverage, according to you?
Yeah, so today, one of the problems that is faced by the livestock industry is that the existing identification, mechanisms are not foolproof. As I mentioned, if an insurance company subcontracts tagging of the animals, identification of the animals to a third party, local personnel, that local personnel would go, collude with the farmer, and the farmer would then keep the tag in the pocket, and then any animal dies, he would then tag that animal and claim insurance. And this is sort of a lose-lose situation for all stakeholders, because the insurance companies, to mitigate such issues, would increase their insurance premium, or in fact would insist on better IDing mechanisms, more expensive ID mechanisms like subcutaneous RFID, which is also not really foolproof. So when you use things like image recognition using commodity phones that the paravet or the artificial insemination technician or other outsourced subcontracting personnel would have, that the insurance company would subcontract to, then it becomes more foolproof because it's easy based on the muzzle print of the cow or the facial patterns or the body patterns and some geotags that we apply. It becomes fairly easy for us to assess whether it's the right animal or not. So when an insurance claim happens, you know that the IDs are not being manipulated, and hence it encourages the insurance companies to bring down their insurance premium. Number one. Number two, as you know, in India, life itself, human life itself, is poorly penetrated from a life insurance point of view. Livestock life insurance is even poorly so penetrated. And then we're now talking about health insurance for livestock. All of this is only possible using things like image recognition and the other concomitant tech enablers like the animal wearables and the herd management system. So that as a combination, we can help our smallholder farmers shift the orbit from a very mere standard life insurance for the livestock at a very nominal premium or a competitive premium to also ensure the animals for yield protection, also ensure the animal for health, for things like in India, the animals get health, cows and cattle get health issues like mastitis, laminitis of the hoof, and other infection. So all of these can be detected at a subclinical level. So farmers, the insurance companies, and the financial companies, all of them get positively impacted if you deploy such technologies, which helps you ensure that the IDs are not manipulated, which helps you monitor your asset in real time, which helps you, get into a preventive healthcare regime instead of a sickness, management regime, and also gives you a 360-degree view of the livestock management. And hence, I think these can really help all the stakeholders, help improve the penetration of these services in the Indian, agri and livestock segment.
Absolutely, I agree with all your points. Very rightly pointed out all the challenges that might incur, and how facial recognition can actually eliminate all these challenges. So lastly, like, where do you want to see the company maybe down the lane 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, we have two, three aspirational components. One is we'd like to, become the de facto digital proxy for all of dairy in India. Obviously, today we garner 7 to 8% of the market share. We'd like to become the de facto player in this segment in the next 3 to 5 years. That's number one. So we become the de facto go-to digital proxy for anything and everything in dairy, right, including pre-harvest and post-harvest. That's one vision that we're moving towards. The second is to see if some of these blueprints can be replicated outside India as well. Because as you know, the cattle and milk is pretty much the same, across the world. So can we, replicate some of this blueprint into other emerging markets, and even developed markets? We had a small subsidiary in France as well. So how do you sort of replicate some of this blueprint? Of course, we'll have to adapt it. What works in India will not work as is, abroad, but it would have to be adapted. But we have aspirations to see some of these blueprints can be taken to other, countries as well. And finally, we're also seeing if there are any other adjacent, crops that we can apply this blueprint to. Obviously, milk is, big enough. As I mentioned, 1/3 of agriculture in India is dairy. 7.6% of agriculture of our GDP is dairy. It's a $225 billion market, 3 times the size of telecom market in India. So it's a big industry and market in itself. But that said, if we are able to get good traction, and also have enough capital, we'd also like to take a stab at seeing if some of what we've done in the dairy industry can also be applied to other adjacent crops. So these are some of the 3 areas that we are working on the next 5 to 7 year kind of horizon.
Thank you so much, Ranjit. Optimistically looking forward to see even more innovative solutions coming up from Stellapps. And as dairy tech startups are mandatory in the coming years too. So it was pleasure talking to you. Hope our listeners also have gained a lot of valuable insights from this session.
Yeah, thank you, Shivani, once again for hosting me on your podcast, and look forward to having this published and a larger audience benefit from whatever little insight I could share. Thank you so much for your time.
Definitely, it was pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.